Okay, so I wanted to kind of make a response video to this one. It's called The Problem with 3D Sonic Inspired Games, and it's by Shemp. I recommend checking out his channel. As you can see, I've subscribed to him. But um, he makes a few valid points and a few points that I think miss the point of some of these games. So we're going to go through the video and I'm going to respond to his different points. And hopefully you'll kind of see the other side of the coin that he seems to be missing.
For real though, this video is mainly about a specific flaw that I've noticed in a lot of Sonic fan games or games inspired by Sonic.
Thanks for the distinction, because a lot of people just all call them all fan games, and it's just not the case. It might sound like a small technicality, but one is an original IP, one is a fan game, so I'd say more work goes into original IPs.
When you think of these two categories, you probably think of the 2D games, since there's more of those. These games typically consist of super bright visuals, quirky...
Hang on, skipping ahead, because it's just the intro part. He's not talking about the games I wanted to discuss yet.
Always try to aim for the same thing, and that typically can be their biggest downfall. What do I mean by that? Well, over the years, I've seen a plethora of the 3D category. The newest game in that category is Rollin' Rascal.
Masterpiece.
Well, now, Raging Richard has been on my radar for quite some time now. I had a lot of fun with the demo, and I greatly appreciate the multiplayer aspect of it. But this video isn't about Relinquish Ronald specifically.
You hear that? He keeps changing up the name. I like that bit.
I'll save that for another time. I'm mainly just using it as the main example for this video. The biggest aspect of this game and other Sonic fan games is the huge open world level design.
Not open world. It's still a normal level, it's just wider. More like an expanded hallway instead of a narrow one.
I suppose you could call it open zones.
No, that's a little different too. Hang on.
Since that's what Frontiers called it, which I also made a...
Frontiers is a whole different thing. It's open zone because it has a whole bunch of Sonic stuff over an open world, but it's more like an in-between, like between something like Unleashed and something like Sonic GT.
Video on that you should check out. It's very inspired by the Sonic Adventure games. And in the fan games, it's kind of the same thing, but also mixed with the Boost games. So with this...
Hang on.
It's kind of the same thing, but also mixed with the Boost.
He uses omens for this example. Omens? It's not... He calls that open zone? Again, it's wider, but not nearly as wide as Rascal, or even Spark.
Games. So with this control scheme, the intent is to have the player run around these big open worlds with all these different paths.
Again, well, you get the idea.
Ways and high-speed typical Sonic staples, like grind rails, homing attack chains, and whatnot. You get the idea. It is really fun to see how fast you can go in these big open landscapes. Those big open landscapes can be these games' biggest downfall, in my eyes. What do I mean by that? Speed needs automation. Remember...
And there we go. That's basically his biggest point throughout the video, and I strongly disagree. You'll see why later.
Remember the times in Sonic Adventure 1, 2, Heroes, hell, even Sonic CD had this, where you're going through a loop and the camera would pan out and show you this cool epic shot of the loop-de-loop, and it looked really cool and cinematic.
I really appreciate that he's using Sonic After the Sequel music. I know that has nothing to do with either of our points, but I just really like that music, specifically this track. Go check out that game.
Well, I'm sorry to the one person who didn't know this, but you're not controlling Sonic. What's the point? These parts...
That was funny.
...are all automated. What that means is whenever you go through these scripted events, the game takes away full or partial control from the player. That way the game can follow the script and pull the camera out and wow the player with these grand spectacles. Every game ever has scripted events. You can consider them like mini cutscenes, basically. Some games have partial automation, where they...
Would this be considered partial automation? I'd say it's just level design because you still have full control of Sonic, and you don't even have to go into this tunnel.
They heavily restrict your movement to guide you along a linear path. This is to give the player a bit more sense of control, but make sure they don't break the game at the same time. Well, the game's not already broken. What happens when you don't have automation? Well, that means the player is completely responsible for controlling any sort of rapid change in level design or tech. Let's take Sonic Unleashed, for example. In this game, you're running at incredibly high speeds, so when you're moving at that fast of a pace, you can't be expected to maneuver Sonic through every single bit of geometry perfectly.
True, for Unleashed, but for other games, what if it's designed around that? Or what if you just practice and you can do that anyway? That's something that people want.
There are moments where the game will take over ever so slightly to not only give the player a little break, but also help keep the players interested by showing off more dynamic camera angles. When you don't have automation, things get a bit wonky. See, without the guardrails of automation, you will...
Okay, so notice this part. He's going through the last added multiplayer track in Rolling Rascals demo. This one is still a work in progress, but
flung off or awkwardly start spazzing out trying to figure out where to go.
You see that? That is his own fault. I hate to say, well, I don't really hate to say it because it's just a game, but take another look.
Flung off or
that was him.
Awkwardly start spazzing out trying to figure out where to go. If the player
and he could have saved himself there. It looks like he did. I mean, I don't really see the problem.
Player is given full control during these large moments.
This is Omens. He also messes up here.
To figure out where to go. If the player is given full control during these large moments, it can ruin it for newcomers.
Newcomers. But it's, I don't know, it might just be me, but you do it again and you get it right the second time.
See, as an experienced 3D Sonic fan, I can understand how to control some jank. We, the fans, are a bit more forgiving because we kind of have a better understanding of how these games are supposed to control. For people who have very little to no experience playing through janky Sonic games, it's going to feel like things just aren't working.
Another example, I think this is Sonic Utopia. It looks really old, but I get what he's saying, but again, these are all on the player, and I feel like that's just not a bad thing.
And to a certain extent, that can be true. I was playing the multiplayer of Roundhouse Redstone with some people in my channel's official Discord server, and it was very interesting hearing how much they were struggling to play it. I was blasting through most of the stages because, again, I feel like I have a better grasp on how to control these types of games.
True, experience works wonders, and it can translate to other games of a similar type. I get what he's saying. His friends had trouble because they were all new to it. And sure, I can see how people can get frustrated, especially if you have low patience and you just want to plug and play and have a good time and that's it. Not practice or anything. I can see how that's a little barrier.
And since they didn't, it quickly got more and more frustrating for them. Just to clarify, I'm not saying that Reliant Randy is a bad game or anything like that.
I love that he keeps doing that. So good.
Again, Relish Roman is going to get his own video later down the road. But for this example, really painted a picture for me about how much I've gotten used to it. So after that, I hopped into the single player and quickly noticed how the open zone-esque nature of these games and a lot of Sonic fan games all...
This is the tutorial of the demo. Still very narrow compared to like the main level of the demo.
Player and quickly...
And I guess if you're not used to that, I guess I was used to it because I came from the Spark games, and it might look overwhelming if you just look at it, but if you look and strategize, then it gets better.
Notice how the open zone-esque nature of these games and a lot of Sonic fan games always have this...
This looks like Green Hill Paradise Act 2. I can't really say much about it because I haven't played that one.
Same problem. There's not much guidance.
Guidance. What is guidance? Okay, So what I consider guidance is like little visual cues to keep you on the right track. And games like Rascal definitely have that. If you look at the level design, then you can see that there's sure it's like scenery, but you see the level elements and where they're pointing, and that's your guidance.
When you go back to the games that these games were inspired by, you can probably note how linear they are. There's some very mild exploration involved, but it's all pretty self-contained. You know where to go because it's super obvious. Even if you venture off to get a power-up or extra goodie, you know where to go after that. With how big these levels can be,
Okay, so this part, he's looking backwards right after the opening section of Buccaneers Beach and Rolling Rascal. Now, I love this level. The first time it took me like 17 minutes to get through. Now I can get it in under 3 minutes because I learned the level, I learned the mechanics, and I know how things are supposed to be. And look, if you see in the background, there are arrows on the paths.
sometimes it's a bit confusing as to where to.
I get that it can be confusing, but it's like you can't just look at it. You have to look at the flow of the design.
Go to get back on track if you venture off. Sometimes you don't even have to venture off. There were a good number of times where I was just flat out confused on where to go next or how to progress.
Now, that part, he just kind of fell into the water. He missed a ramp. Hang on.
Go to get back on track if you venture off. Sometimes you don't.
Yeah, so there was a ramp. Hang on.
Track if you venture off.
There. So he just runs off into the water, even though he could have launched off the ramp towards the house in the background.
Sometimes you don't even have to venture off. There were a good number of times where I was just.
If he noticed that, he could have just kept going on in the right direction.
Nature also have a problem involving skipping just vast chunks of the level.
No. Skipping vast chunks of the level. What games? He goes back to Unleashed, but I wonder what games he's talking about, because it's not GT, it's not Rascal, and it's not, well, maybe Spark to a certain extent because of the Magnet Dash, but GT and Rascal, no, those are specifically designed to be big so that those leaps don't skip a whole bunch of level design. It's like in Green Hill in Sonic 1, there's that place with the tunnel that goes down and then a huge, not huge ramp, but there's the tunnel and then a ramp that goes up to a huge group of rings. It's the same exact thing, but in 3D.
3D Sonic games usually have level elements that are super vertical to keep the player moving forward.
Yeah, this is what I consider hallway level design. It's narrow and there's no question as to where to go. You just go, but then it's the same every time, and it's good if it's complex enough, but after a while it does start to get old.
Either that or they'll have big death pits.
I mean, I don't really see the problem with death pits because you can get around it. You can work around it. I mean, it depends on the game, though. It's kind of a broad topic.
With these games, it's all pretty open. Since you gain so much uncapped speed, you can shoot off into the stratosphere and skip so much of the level. Sonic games usually have
Okay, that example. Hang on.
Capped speed, you can shoot off.
This is Floresta Blanca in Spark 2. I don't have Spark 2 installed, but I have Spark 3, which still has this level. And it's
Into the
what he's showing
so much of the level.
is speedrun techniques, kind of. And I don't think that's skipping the level. I think that's using the level design. I'll show you in a moment. Okay, so here we are on the level he was showing, where he was talking about skipping chunks of the level. I mean, What else do you use ramps for? Depends on your execution, how and when you do it. I'll show you. Here's a big ramp that I like to use. So I used an energy dash there. Bam! Did you see that? Tight inputs. Speedrunners love that. Satisfying to pull off.
Have what's known as a speed cap, so you don't do that. Because a lot of the time you'll either get somewhere you're not supposed to be,
hang on,
the game is unfinished or buggy, or they'll blast through all of the specifically placed level design elements.
Yeah, okay, so that's what I thought. This is the demo of Sonic GT. The last demo from 2019, I think. So it is unfinished. It is buggy. So while the example fits, it's not a good one.
That were meant to challenge the player. It can be really fun to shoot off into the sky with the sheer speed that you gain. But if every level is you finding new ways to do that, it can get pretty stale pretty quickly.
Hang on, I've got a video for you guys. This is one of my finest speedrun moments. Specifically speedrunning. And it's not about flinging yourself over the level. This is using the level design that we have. That's the fastest I've gotten through that section.
Imagine like watching a movie from the behind the scenes videos. Kind of like that. So obviously, the biggest thing that this game and other games can do to improve the experience in my eyes is automate a bit more. It's okay to hold our hands to show us something cool. Lock in our seatbelts and take us on this roller coaster ride. We're here to have fun. So
he's showing loops. I'll show you some loops. Take a look at this level. No guardrails, no automation, just you, the mechanics you've learned, and multiple paths. It still fits the example he's trying to say, that things could use a little more guidance, a little more scripting. No, just look at this. Bam, and I skipped the loop. I love this gravity switching mechanic, but you get the idea.
And to all the game devs, please someone make a Boost Sonic inspired game just for me. That'd be so fire. Let me
Sonic Omens.
Voice it. Someone voice it. That'd be super cool. It's fun. But I'm curious as to what you think. The games I show off today slap? Do you think the jank adds to the charm?
Not jank, him messing up.
Do I look good in a dress?
I don't have a dress.
And ultimately, what do you think are some big problems with 3 Sonic-inspired games? Let me know in the comments down below. If you're looking for other videos to fill your time, I would highly recommend checking out the video I did about an amazing mod for Sonic Forces that ultimately...
Oh yeah, that was about overclocked. But, you know, the video is basically done. As you can see, he's concluding. But, so what do you guys think? Are you on the side of scripting and just blasting through and having fun? Or are you on the side of making your own fun by doing whatever you want? I think that's a good discussion to have. And I think a healthy mix is okay, but it depends on the game, you know? Like, he showed Omens a few times, and that game has both. It has open areas, but it also has scripted segments. I think it did that pretty well. But anyway, yeah, thanks for watching.
What's that on the screen?